Hello, good morning colleagues and friends. Before I turn on the cameras to stream the program live online, we'd like to provide some housekeeping information for everybody. We'd like to remind everyone to switch your mobile phone device to silent mode. You are invited to take every opportunity to pose questions to the plenary speakers and the panelists by keying a question through the pigeonhole. There is a QR code on your table stand for scanning. We'll turn on the cameras to live stream the program now so that the virtual participants can join us. We are streaming online at the count of 3, 2, 1. Good morning and welcome to Day 2 of the inaugural Hybrid Singapore Health and Biomedical Congress 2022, organized by the National Healthcare Group. A warm welcome to our on-site participants and also to the online participants who are watching the program through our live stream platform. I hope you are as excited as me as we have an amazing program lineup for today. I'm Dr. Chan Jun Zik, one of the senior resident from the Department of Orthopedic Surgery at Khoo Teck Puat Hospital, and I'm your MC for session 5 today. You might remember the NHG physiotherapists from yesterday. Yes, we are going to invite them again on stage today to show us another set of easy stretching exercises that we can do when working from home or at our workstations. Let us give a warm welcome to our physiotherapists to come on stage now. Claudia, Yixun, and Divya. Over to you, Yixun and team. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, it's nice to be here on the second day of the Congress again. Hope you guys had a very good first day. And today, similarly, what the MC has already said, is going to be a jam-packed one full of activities. So I understand it's quite early in the morning. Yeah, so some of us might not have had our coffee, breakfast is just half eaten, and we are still a bit stiff and all. So today we are going to go through some simple exercises to just freshen us up and then to start the day proper. Yeah, so the exercises that we are going to lead today are actually some simple ones that you can actually do at home, in office, in the Congress, with just some basic items such as the water bottle, which we all have here, and I think there are some on the table. At home, when I'm practicing with my mom, she was using a shampoo bottle, or some can use like rice bag or bean bags. So shall we all stand up, grab a bottle or two, and then we'll just go through these exercises before we play with the song. Okay? Yeah. All right, so the first exercise that we are going to do is actually bicep curls. So just up and down, up and down. So if you like, we're going to be doing 8 times. If you want to change hands, correct. If you want to change hands, you can actually do that as well, or you can actually hold 2 bottles. Okay, so after 8 times, we are going to be doing shoulder raises. Up and down, up and down. If you want, you can just hold it 2 together, up and down, up and down for 4 times. The next one, tricep curls, up, down for 4 times, up, down, good. Very nice. 4 times. All right, so after these hand exercises, we are going to be doing some mini squats, or if you would like, sit to stands as well. So we'll just be doing squats, up, squat, and up 4 times. Okay? Yeah. Then the next one, we're going to beat the Z monster, okay? So we're going to be punching left, right, left, right, left, right for 8 times. Okay? After 8 times, we're going to punch forward. Okay, so make sure there's adequate space in front for so that you don't hit any of your counterparts, okay? All right? Yeah, so 8 times. And then the last one, we'll be doing some tiptoes. Okay, while we are doing tiptoes, we are going to raise our hands also up and down, up and down. So 4 times. Yeah, nice. Okay, everyone okay? It's quite easy, right? Okay, so don't worry if you forget the steps. We'll be doing it all together and then with the song to make it a bit more fun. All right? Yeah, so we'll do the song. You can sway your body a little bit. Just loosen up. 1, bicep curls. 2, good. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, shoulder flexions. 1, down. 2, down. Good. 3, down. 4. Now, okay, triceps. Up, down. 2, down. 3, down. One more. Okay, squats. Okay, squat and down. And up. Squat and up. Good. Squat and up. Punch. Punch left, right. 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, forward. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, tiptoes. Up and down. Up and down. Up and down. One more, and then do the biceps again, okay? 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, shoulders up, down. 2, down. 3, down. One more. Okay, triceps down. Down. 3, down. Okay, squat time. Squat and down. Squat and up. Squat and up. One more. Okay, let's punch the monster. 6, 7. Okay, forward punches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Last one. Tiptoes and down. Tiptoes down. Tiptoes and down. And one last one. Up and down. Well done, everyone. Hope you guys are freshened up. Yeah, thank you. Yep.
All right. Thank you, Yishin, Claudia, and Divya for leading us through the exercises. Now I know why there are so many bottles of water on your table now. All right, do remember to add these exercises to the regular work routine to reduce the tension from prolonged sitting. For our online participants who have just logged on, a warm welcome to you. We invite you to send in your questions through the Q&A tab that you can see on the top of your screen. For our on-site audience, scan the QR code that you can see on the table stand and keep the questions coming in, and the panelists will try their best to answer them. And now, without further ado, may I invite on stage the Triad League and Chairperson, Assistant Professor Clive Tan, who is currently the Assistant Chief of Group Integrated Care from National Healthcare Group. He's also the Adjunct Assistant Professor of Saw Swee Hock School of Public Health from the National University of Singapore. He and his esteemed presenters for Session 5, Track 1A today will discuss on the topic, population health, what does it mean for the providers, patients, and residents. Prof. Tan, please.
A very good morning to everyone. We have a lot of people in the room today, and we also have a Zoom room that's online. Good morning. I'm personally very excited about the program that we have for you for this session. But I thought we also do a recap of population health because it was discussed quite a bit yesterday. If you can recall, yesterday DS Wei Yang mentioned a few P's. Right? He mentioned population health, he mentioned preventive health, and he mentioned precision health. So these 3 P's, it's good to remember because he did mention that it was kind of like a evolution of the 3 beyonds. Right? So if we think back, population health, preventive health, and precision health, you can map it to the 3 beyonds in some ways. Then our Deputy Group CEO, Eugene, also mentioned population health, and he mentioned something that possibly maybe we don't think about so often, is that population health also includes the people that we don't see. Right? So most of us, we are working in institutions, but when we talk about population health, we have to think about the people that are actually not coming to hospitals and not coming to our clinics also. So there's this hidden population that we now need to be thinking about also when we talk about population health. And when we talk about population health, it's actually a populations with an S, right? Because within the population that we are caring for, that 1.5 million population in Central and North region, we actually have subpopulations, right? So populations, subpopulations, you think about the subpopulation of patients with diabetes, pre-diabetes, patients with cancers, patients with heart failures. So this would constitute the subpopulations that we'll need to think about. So one way to think about it is populations within population, right? And the last P I want to end off with is also the people, right? So in the quality circles, we have a saying, what matters to you, right? So in this case, we also think actually people is what matters. So people is what matters, and we are now moving away from just patients, right? But we're also talking about residents. That's why I use the word people instead of the word patients. And today's session will cover a lot about people-centered care. And with me, I have an esteemed panel, so powerful. I'm so happy to have them on my panel because these are the people with a plan for population health. So I'm saying a lot of P's. But I think that we also start with the power of one, right? Because that's why we really need to start to change the population. Yes, we can start top down, but we also need to start with the person in front of us, in the chair in front of us. So again, I'm also a teaching faculty, so I do have to wear that hat and say, what is the objective of today's session, right? So let's think about this, okay? What does this mean for you as a part of listening to this, whether in person or over Zoom? I ask you to think about it from a few lenses, from the lens of the provider, which most of us in the room are, from the lens of a patient, right? You know of patients whom you are caring for, but you yourself are also a patient at some point in time. But also as a family and a caregiver, right? Because we all have family members who will fall sick at some point in time. What is the care that we desire for them? And what is the future that we want to build together? So this session is actually very future-looking, which is why I'm so excited. And I think to kick us off, we have Lindsay, who will be telling us about the key concepts. So this session actually very well curated with the help of Sweet Fun to flow very, very nicely. So I just want to introduce Lindsay first before she takes the stage. She's so firstly, she's from UK, right? So very happy that she's here in Singapore teaching, and we roped her in to speak to us today. So she's the National Director for the Year of Care Partnerships in UK, and today she'll be talking to us about what the UK has done and what the Year of Care team has done, and really sharing with us a lot of key concepts that we can use immediately and in the near future for our Healthier SG work. So with nothing further ado, Lindsay, the stage is yours.
Thank you for the invitation to speak today. So, as you said, we're from the UK. We have a tried and tested programme of implementing something called personalised care and support planning, which replaces routine planned care for people with long-term conditions in the UK, predominantly within the primary care setting. And the fundamental aim of this programme is to try and create the space for people with long-term conditions to sit down and have a collaborative conversation which is forward-focused and really is thinking about how they're going to live with and manage their long-term conditions. We've been doing this for over 17 years, and we've done this in single conditions and multiple long-term conditions, and we've seen a number of benefits, including improvements in clinical parameters, improvement in staff experience, and improvements in patient experience of care. So in this session, I want to introduce you to the principles of Year of Care, in particular what personalised care and support planning is about, to look at the key components of that and how we change our care processes in particular to support people to be much more involved in decision making and planning their own care. So our programme started many years ago, and we decided as a principle that involving people in the redesign of their care was a fundamental element of what we wanted to do. So we sat down as practitioners, service managers and with patients to think about what care looked like and to think about how it needed to be different. At one of these events, a bit like the room that we're in now, someone drew this picture, and it has fundamentally shifted our thinking about how we consider long-term conditions care. So you can see there a green wavy line, which represents the hours that people live with their long-term condition, with its ups and downs, day in, day out. And those orange bars represent the regular planned reviews that people with long-term conditions have with a healthcare provider. And really what this person explained to us was that, relatively speaking, they spend hours living with and managing their condition, out with those very small slithers of time that they spend in the healthcare system, which might only amount to about 4 hours a year. And when it comes to thinking about the purpose of those reviews, it made us begin to think that some of our retrospective tick box activity, which we'd incentivised in the UK, was actually fairly redundant and wasn't really helping people look forward and manage their health. And when you really think about it, if you live with a long-term condition, which by definition can't be cured and can only be managed, then actually most of the activity happens on the green line. So if you take a single condition like diabetes and you look at all of the activities that need to happen to actually successfully look after that condition, most of those activities and actions fall to the individual. With the red bars, the times that we see people, really being used to help people with that and to make sure that we're doing the things that only we can do, like performing tests and assessments and accessing our expertise as clinicians. So for me, this was sort of quite a change in my thinking, recognising really that as a clinician I have very little control over what people choose to do, and that I needed to think about doing things very differently in order to enable people to feel that there was a point to what they did and to help people think about the things that they could do to manage their health. So traditionally, if we take a single condition like diabetes and we look at the annual review, people come in for an information gathering visit in which they have some tests and checks taken, and this is the state before we started implementing the care and support planning. And then they come in for this annual checkup, which is actually mostly fulfilling the needs of the service to tick boxes, collect information, and make sure that we've done those sort of assessments that we do to people. There's very little time for making a plan with people, and we try to squeeze activities like education into a matter of minutes within those consultations. So in a sense, there was an idea that we're really not fulfilling the needs of individuals, because if you ask clinicians what they're trying to do in their 15, 27-minute consultations, they're jam-packing it with huge amount of activities like needing to monitor complications, assessing risk, trying to explain things to people, trying to do some breaking bad news. So in a sense, the person's agenda gets utterly squeezed out, and there's very little time for planning. So that was the situation that we were really looking at in the UK, and that was borne out by massive surveys that were commissioned by the NHS, which demonstrated that whilst we were doing the equivalent of a good MOT for people, so we're doing amazing amounts of checks and assessments, we actually weren't doing much to involve people in their care. So if you look at things like agreeing a plan to manage my care, discussing goals about what I want to do to manage my condition, that was only happening on about half of the occasions that we were seeing people, which for me feels like a huge waste when you think about the fact that it is the individual's actions that will ultimately create good outcomes for them. So the goal of our programme was really to close that gap, to try and move away from an assessment-based focus in which we barely had any time to talk to people, and to really try and think about involving people much more in a much more meaningful way. We looked at the international evidence base and discovered the chronic care model from the States, the Ed Wagner work, which demonstrated that the international evidence base that showed better outcomes for people with long-term conditions was best achieved when you had an engaged, empowered patient working in a system that actually enabled them to have productive interactions with their healthcare providers. So really looking at how things could be more meaningful and productive for the individual citizen or person who lived with a long-term condition. So the key aims of our programme are to, first of all, try and create more space for people to have a more meaningful and useful collaborative conversation with a healthcare professional. And we call that the personalised care and support planning conversation. It's very much about changing the relationship from a transactional type of approach to one which is much more about a therapeutic relationship. And then once we've attended to that and thought about the systems that create that opportunity, we then wanted to try and find ways in which we could support people on that green wavy line. So thinking beyond the consultation to the things that help people live with and manage their conditions, preferably within their local communities and linking them to existing community activities. So we took this idea of the person's lived experience with their long-term condition, the limited amounts of encounters that they have with a healthcare professional, and created 3 core principles with patients, with people with long-term conditions, about how they'd like their care to be different. The first thing people said is we'd like to really be involved in these conversations. We want to be involved in making decisions, and we want to be able to talk about things that matter to us. So we'd like these conversations to be much more personalised. People said they need to be much more prepared. They'd like to understand who they're going to see and what for, but also to have more information in advance to help them think things through before they met their healthcare provider. And finally, people wanted to be signposted to the activities and support beyond the consultation that allows them to keep well and manage their conditions successfully. So we built this programme grounded in a strong philosophical approach. We agreed that as clinicians we bring expertise to any clinical encounter. That's what we go to school to do, to learn. But that actually people who live with long-term conditions bring the experience of living with that long-term condition and their preferences about how they do that. We recognise that people given the opportunity can articulate their needs and decide on their own priorities, and that people with long-term conditions are the primary actors and decision makers in terms of how they live with and manage their condition. And as such, the only way to really get people to think about changing things is to actually involve them in that decision-making process themselves. So our initial work was in diabetes. We demonstrate huge amounts of benefit at no additional cost within UK systems. We piloted this in other long-term conditions such as respiratory conditions and vascular conditions, and it works as a single condition type of approach, but actually, latterly, to recognise that people often live with multiple conditions and see multiple specialists and get lots of different advice. We decided to try and coordinate this into a single care and support plan and process, usually in primary care, with the benefit of expert generalism to support that. This includes frailty as well as the physical conditions that people live with. And if we do this, what we've discovered in the UK is that you can take all of those separate reviews, which aren't always necessarily achieving a lot in themselves, and collate those into a much more streamlined approach so that you actually bring people back less for more meaningful appointments that draw together everything that they live with. And we create a single care and support plan and process for people with single and multiple long-term conditions. In addition, we also signpost people to community-based activities, which cuts back on the need for reviews. So the new process separates out all of the task-based activities into a single appointment for all of the conditions that people have, usually performed by a healthcare assistant or a nurse, who uses a template to do all of the disease surveillance, the physical checks and assessments associated with the combination of conditions that people live with. That's usually triaged by the professional, and that information is shared with the patients. This is separated in time by a couple of weeks, so that people come back usually a fortnight later to have a conversation with a professional who is also prepared because they have all of that information at hand. But critically, we shared that information with the patient. So one of the key components you'll remember is this idea of preparation. People get a results letter, which is just the routine results, the things that it can make a difference to, like HbA1c. They get things like their cholesterol and kidney function checks so they can know how they're getting on with things like that. But they also get an agenda-setting prompt, which brings in some of the psychosocial issues that may be actually impacting on people's self-management and may be actually more important and pressing and concerning to them than perhaps some of the biomedical parameters. So we ask people what's important to them. We give them permission to bring topics to the conversation and to lead that so that they're more in the driving seat. And we leave space for people to write questions and concerns down so that they don't forget when they come into the consultation and they go away with the things that addressed that they want to talk about. The results sharing is very visual, it's very health literate, it's done in a way that we try and make it easy for people to see what their risks are and that they can make that judgment themselves. It includes a previous and a most up-to-date result and a brief explanation of what those things mean. And we found that this really engages people in things that they've never been interested in before. It enhances and deepens their understanding, and it gets them into consultation with some ideas of what they're doing well with, but also some things that they might want to focus on. So in a sense, we create this balance between the sort of psychosocial and the biomedical things, and we can attend to all of them within one consultation. Here you see a yellow piece of paper that is used in one of our general practices instead of the colour-coded sheets. And I don't know if you can read the writing on there, but you can see that someone has populated this particular piece of paper with some thoughts and things that they want to talk about, including not prepared to go through with any more probing. I'm not sure what that means, but it would have been an interesting conversation nonetheless. So people are much more prepared when they come along to the conversation. And we also have a very intentional conversation based on an empowerment model, which begins with finding out what's going on in people's lives and what they want to get out of the consultation, spends more time exploring things, and spends at least half of the consultation planning and thinking about the goals that people want to work on themselves. So it's about working with people and not doing things to them. And we've been lucky to be here in Singapore delivering a training programme and really seeing clinicians respond really well to it in terms of thinking about how they might need to listen more and think about fixing people less. So helping us work out how we help people solve their own problems and work out how they can manage their own health based on the way that they live their lives. So working with, not doing to. And the result sharing and the preparation really does create a collaborative space for people to share ideas. So I love this image because this is a person who's brought their results back and their preparation back. And you can see the hand of the clinician and the hand of the patient sharing their understanding of what things mean and having a sense of collaboration, that they're in it together, trying to work together to think through what to do next. And in this particular practice, the care and support plan is done both by nurses and by GPs. So in a sense, we're also using different professionals to do this work. It's not all reliant on doctors. So care plans have become a thing in the UK as a result of much of the work that we've done. But actually, I really want to emphasise that the care plan is only worth the care planning conversation that you've had. So in my mind, this approach, this personalised care and support planning, is about having deep and meaningful conversations with people in which you produce a care plan as a result of the conversation that you've had. It's not about another tick box activity in which we just give people a pre-populated care plan or treatment plan. And what we've discovered is if we have conversations with people and we really sort of get to grips with the things that would make a difference to how they manage their health, and if we take each individual stick man on the diagram on the left, we find that people want different things or need different things. So some people clearly still need to see a specialist for a initiation of a new treatment or to monitor something that needs specialist input. But increasingly we're seeing people who actually want to do things that are more about getting support in their local community, such as peer support, going to a knit and natter group because they've actually felt so lonely and isolated that they've not really wanted to manage their health or see anyone. So really looking at some of the social issues that determine people's health and thinking about how we can connect people to the things that support them. And so if you look at this across a system or across a locality or place, we've created a single process that is common in general practice and people understand and know what their role is within because it's been going along for quite a while now, in which individuals are reviewed once a year for a sit down where we really spend a bit more time looking at things together. All of the information that needs to be collected to give people good clinical care is done across a single process. Professionals get a chance to look at that and know what's coming at them. Patients get a chance to look at that and know what's coming at them. But there is this space in which we can really sit down and think things through with people, in which we might come to some decisions around referrals, but we might also introduce people to social prescribing through a links worker type approach in the UK. So they might actually end up thinking through something like getting some more physical activity rather than actually taking more medicines for their conditions. And what we've discovered is that if you want to take this approach and implement it, you actually need to put a number of things in place together. So we've come up with this metaphor of a house. The idea being that if you really want this to work, you need to attend to a number of things across a number of domains. And that if we really want to protect the space for this personalised care and support plan and conversation, we need to do all of these things together. So in the UK, this programme is often called the House of Care programme. So across the implementation of this programme, what we've learnt is that we need to tend to our organisational processes, not just at a micro level, but at a macro level. So at a practice level, we need to think of the IT systems that will enable this recall system, that will enable the healthcare assistant to do that information gathering all together, and that will allow us to record that care plan. We need ways of having our populations identified as part of that recall system, and we need ways to include continuity within this so that people build up trust and rapport in the clinicians that they see, and they don't have to tell their stories innumerate times. From a patient point of view, this idea of preparation is critical. It was interesting to see the journey that people who attended training came on to last week, in which they really recognised that being given your results in a consultation, it's impossible to make decisions at the time that you're given those results. So having them beforehand is really, really important. But also linking people to support in their local community is also an important aspect of this approach. From the point of view of what we've been doing in the UK and here, we recognise that actually thinking about our own mindset around long-term conditions is important, and that there are a whole different set of skills to the consultations that we're doing, which are about helping people in a solution-focused approach. This isn't something that a single person can do in their own practice from the point of view of this reorganisation of care. So this is about teamwork, and it requires a very senior role modelling, championing and buy-in. At a commissioning level, we need to develop the more the medicine activities and think about how people are linked to that. And we need to build this into the systems in an intentional way so that it is planned and works well. And I want to leave you with a quote from the pilot programme, which really, I think, sums up the messiness that we had before in our clinical encounters with patients. We see people, we bring them back again, and we see them again, and we just keep on going round in circles. And before the Year of Care programme, some of our clinicians and support staff recognised that they hadn't really thought about what needed to go on behind the scenes to make a clinical encounter effective. And in a sense, this way of working has made us think about that more. And it has really highlighted the roles of the administrative team and the support of clinicians working with administrative teams to create better systems of care that allow us to do our job well and communicate well with patients. So I think what I'm going to do now is pass you on to the next speaker, who's going to talk a little bit about how this is working in Singapore.
All right. Hey, thanks, Lindsay. Oh my God, that was so good. Thank you. So we'll have Lindsay up later again, and you'll have an opportunity to ask her questions. So we see that a few questions have come in through the pigeonhole already. So please vote for the questions you like, and also please put in more questions there. So I know that some of you are like, wow, exciting. I want that, right? I wish I had that for my mother. I wish I had that for my sister and all that. Some of you may say, okay, this sounds like maybe in private sector, I will get this kind of very personal care, but public sector, is it possible? Okay, but I want to tell you that this is not an imaginary future. It is already happening. The future is now. And we do have our next speaker, Dr. Yu Tong Wei from the National University Hospital. He's a senior consultant at the Division of Endocrinology in the Department of Medicine at NUH. So, he has already done some of that. And not just recently, but already for a few years. He has been he had some practice in Scotland before, and I think that's where he got the idea from the UK. And I'll leave him to share more with you about his practice and how he has been doing what Lindsay said in Singapore setting. Yeah. Dr. Yu, over to you. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Clive, for the very nice introduction, and very rightly pointed out that I believe there are questions floating in your minds now, like, this sounds like a good idea, but does it work in Singapore? I mean, Singapore, I think we are Asian culture, we are very obedient. Maybe we just want to listen to our doctors, and whatever the doctors tell us, we will do it. But we have been on a journey for the past 5 years or so. So we have implemented the care and support planning in NUH Diabetes Clinic. And then we very quickly expanded it out to our National University Polyclinics, and also in Alexandria, where we expanded the model to try it out locally beyond diabetes with some other chronic diseases such as gout, obesity, sleep apnea, and things like that. So for the next 20 minutes or so, I hope to give you a better glimpse of how does that conversation actually look. So Lindsay has now laid a very clear framework and philosophy of how Year of Care came about. So I hope that I can give you a more visual idea of how it works. So my title of the talk is Transforming Clinic Consultations into Meaningful Conversations, the role of a prepared patient and a committed healthcare practitioner. So this is my outline. So I'll first contrast and compare how a conversation differs from a consultation, which is a traditional term that we're more used to. And then we'll talk about one side of the pillar of the house, if you remember, Lindsay showed you, which is the prepared patient. And then finally, we'll touch upon the committed healthcare practitioner. And then I'll link you on to what Swee Fun will come up next to cover. So firstly, from consultation to conversation. So this is me in the clinic, and before I embark on the journey of a care and support planning, I will share with you how my consults look, right? And I will not be embarrassed with sharing it with you, and I hope you will reflect on your practice also, whether that looks something like that as well. So in my busy clinic, usually in the past I have about 20 patients in the morning, so I have 5 to 10 minutes with them, each of them. And what usually happens is the patients come to our clinic and they will get a point of care testing of a HbA1c, and the results will be available in about 5 to 7 minutes. So when I call them in, I'll usually greet them and say, "Good morning, uncle, how are you today?" And a lot of times I probably don't really mean to even ask them, "How are you?" It's just to start off a conversation, because silence is usually very uncomfortable. And being in a consultation, usually you want to take control and drive the conversation. So after that, right, again, you were not very sure what next to say, right? And very frequently, my conversation zooms very quickly into the A1C. So I ask them, "Uncle, do you know what's your HbA1c today?" And 90% of the time they'll say no. The 10% that say yes probably is not true, because they don't get to see the finger prick HbA1c that they've just done. So they'll say no, and I'll say, "Okay, it's 8.5. Then I'll have a blank face staring at me, and I'll ask them, "Do you know what's the ideal HbA1c?" And they'll say, "I don't know." And I'll say, "It's 7. And they say, "Oh, doctor, because I just had a cup of kopi or kopi just now." Then I'll have to say, no, the HbA1c is average of your glycemic control for the past 3 months. So what you have just taken wouldn't have affected these results. Then I'll say, "Oh." Then I'll go on to talking about whether you take your medications, whether you have hypoglycemia, whether you monitor your sugar, whether you have exercised or looked after your diet, and then what's your blood pressure, what's your cholesterol, do you still smoke, do you have your kidney checks, your food. And you can see how much there is to be done in 5 minutes, right? And from that demonstration of consultation that I've showed you, talking about and clarifying what A1C is, that itself already taken away maybe 3.5 minutes. And I have to cover so many things in the next 3 minutes if I have it. And the worst thing is, the next time they come back, this whole exact same tape will play back. So they will not remember A1C is average of 3 months, and if they still have a high A1C, they will give me the same defense of they've just had something. And if you do 4 TCUs in a year, that's 40 minutes of non-productive consultation. All they get is they carry a bag of medication and go home 4 times a year. And I get my pay every month. Okay? So, just to summarize, my clinic consultations used to be a massive check boxes ticking exercise. So you can see the whole list that I showed you. Those are things I want to make sure that I do in every consultation. And those are and they look identical and repetitive. And those of check boxes are not what the patients, that might not be what matters to the patients most. And mostly they are my agenda and very disease-centric. Lots of information and advice giving, and some of the patients will describe to you, not in your face, but after they get out or go home, and tell them, every time I go and see Dr. Yu, all I get was whacking. Sorry. And it feels transactional, and it's usually very cognitive heavy, and very few opportunities to go to something that would really matter to the patient, which a lot of times dwell in the emotional space. Also, sometimes we avoid doing that intentionally because I got no time. If I open up a Pandora box about mood, depression, and all those emotional things, firstly, I might not be sure that I have the skills to handle that. And I also don't want to handle that because I will have lunch at 3 o'clock if I do that. So that's me. Now, when people ask me, what do I do? Especially those who don't know that my job is a doctor, I will tell them, I chat with people. I've even undone the word patients because I really want to see them as people, as persons. And Clive has actually brought that up in his introduction very aptly. So I can see some of you frown. We are professionals. What are you talking about? Chatting with people and get paid? So hold that thought, and I'll show you what I mean. So the paradigms have changed now. The paradigms that form the foundation of this so-called care and support planning conversation are the follows, right? We want to be truly person-centered, and being person-centered means I really respect, and the conversations really wants to support the person's beliefs, values, and what they really want to do. So that's what we call person-centeredness. We have to be non-judgmental. You know, when patients tell you, I haven't taken my medications, they are not naughty patients, they are not non-compliant patients, but simply they have reasons that impair and make it difficult for them to take the medications. It's as simple as that. And that reason might be the system. It might be also me. So the medications that I give really doesn't fit the patient. So it might not be non-compliant, but it's just that the plan that I thought was perfect for me really doesn't fit the patient, right? So we need to be really non-judgmental. A meeting of equal experts, Lindsay has raised that, but really patients are experts in their own lives, and frequently I've been surprised by them for coming up with solutions and plans that is completely out of my worldview. And those are solutions that would be impossible to come from me. So we are sort of experts only in the subject matter, so we bring up certain agenda suggestions and advice perhaps, but patients really are experts in their own right. And we want to really go beyond the cognitive aspects of educating the patients, telling the patients, advise the patients, and nagging at the patients even. Because a lot of things that make the most impactful change usually do not dwell in the cognitive space. Just like us, we can know a lot of things, but we will still do it regardless. And it has to go deeper into the motivation, the reasons, and the emotion space. Next slide, please. Thank you. So there is a structure, and you have seen this slide also earlier on. There is a structure to this conversation, to this chat. And it's very intentional. We usually start very openly after the processes being put in to prepare the patients before that, right? The information gathering, sharing the information, the results and reflection letter. We gather the stories, and then we then dive deep into one or two priority being guided by the patients. And then having explored in detail the real issues that matters to the patient, we then set goals, we make some action plans, and then when they come back, the conversation continues rather than looking identical. Next slide, please. So having that compare and contrast, I will then talk a little bit more about the prepared patient. Next slide. So this is the local version that we did for the results and the reflection letter. in NUH and also similarly in NUP and in Alexandra Hospital that we used. And we are very careful. If you can see, right, on the first image on the top left, we used to call it Diabetes Care Planning Results Letter. But later on, we revised it to call it a Reflection and Results Letter because we don't want patients to just focus on the results too. So in page 2, where you see my face there with a conversation bubble, we want to ask them what is really important to them in this moment of their life. And the reason my face is there is not because I'm narcissistic. This is an idea given by our patients because they told us that it sounds like when I get the letter and I see this, it's already the start of that conversation, even before I step into your room. So why don't you put your face there so that it's sort of like, give me a visual of, reflecting on what I really want to bring up. So there are other pointers if they can't answer that very too wide a question, and then there is a specific question to ask them about the mood. And then the next page, patients tell us that they want to see what they do well first, and then what are other areas that they can do better. Not do badly, but they can do better. Because a lot of times, from our healthcare professional lens, right, those that are okay, we don't talk about it. If the BP is perfect, LDL is perfect, we don't talk about it. We don't tend to talk about it. We just bring up those that are problematic. And then we bring up and talk about your A1C is high. Something like that, right? And then we give a color-coded risk level and a trend so that they can see how they're doing with the brief explanations of each item. And then the last page is used together when we have the conversation to set the goals, identify action plans, explore the barriers, and what are the alternatives and strategies that they can take if there are those barriers crop up. So by doing that, next slide please, they will come in more prepared and their position will be elevated into a more equal position to have that real conversation rather than come in occupying a position that's much lower than us being a healthcare professional. So this is a real example of a patient who went through the PACE-D program in the National University Polyclinics. You can see at the first column under the A1C, what the patient has written is dinner plus metformin before fasting. This one I'm not sure what the patient wanted to say, so we can clarify that. Is medication for life? So that's one common question that patients will bring up. He wants to avoid sugary drinks totally. So they have identified for themselves what is a big theme that is probably contributing to that high glycemic control or whatever. And then what causes LDL cholesterol is a question that the patient wants us to help him with. Not enough rest affect BP? Question mark. Does mood affect BP? Does beer affect BP? Smoking, currently he smokes 1 packet per day. He thinks it's good to cut down. So he already sort of putting down some of the thoughts that he may want to put into action. And for weight, he has already sort of set a target that he wants to go 69.85. And then less carbohydrate intake, is it bad? So you can see that there are so many questions. So in Zen, right, there's a saying that says, when the student is ready, the guru will appear. And this is the state exactly what we have moved the patient into. The student or the patient is now ready. They are all thirsty to let us jump in and educate them, if you like. I don't like that word, but rather than they come unprepared and then we try and, like dragging an elephant up the tree, throwing in all our spanners to try and educate and fix them. So by doing that very small mechanism of preparing them, you can see now how the table has turned. And our job becomes actually very, very easy because they're ready. Next slide, please. So remember my previous consultations, and just now I've just shown you what it looked at the outside. But actually in the past, the traditional consultation model, in the inside, our patients feel like they are like a delinquent student going into a discipline master's room. They won't tell you the truth. They want to look good. And even if they have thought about asking us one or two real questions, they're not sure whether we want to listen to them. And they probably don't dare to bring it up. Or maybe due to their 20 years of past experience, they already don't believe that we really want to hear all those issues. So all those real issues will not be brought up. And therefore, when we start implementing this brand new model, some of the patients don't immediately get it. And therefore, next slide please, we have to prepare the patients to be prepared. So there's an extra work, there's an extra step even before that. So our coordinators in the program did a fabulous job in that. They tell the patients, no, this time different, real one. The doctors really want to listen to you now, not fake. So you really prepare yourself, okay? You come, okay? And you write down everything that you really want to talk about, okay? So this is the preparation before the preparation. Next slide, please. So we have these leaflets and coordinators preparing the patients for preparation. And then we created a video that the patients can see and resonate with, and we tell them this is really what we want to do with you. Next slide, please. The other side of the coin is us, the committed healthcare practitioner. Next slide, please. I've elaborated a little bit about the paradigm, which is the person-centeredness, meeting of two equal experts and all. But that's probably just, you've now gotten a bit of idea about what that is, right? But if you go back to that field, the results letter, the reflection letter that's filled in by the patient, right? If we don't truly adopt the paradigm, when you see that the patient just wanted to do certain things that may not fit with our perfectionist mind of a healthcare practitioner. For example, let's say if the patient say, I don't want to talk about smoking, we may frown and say, why don't you talk about smoking? That's the only problem that you're having now. The rest of the things are all green. That's the only thing in the red box. Why don't you want to talk about smoking? Then we might sometimes unconsciously fall back to the old paradigm, and then we will, try our best to fix the patient again. But this time it might use a bit different, it might look a bit different because now that we have undergone the CSP training and we use a little bit more different skills, but the patient can tell if you are not truly have interest or respect them. So the paradigm is still the most important thing for our change to happen. But having a right paradigm also is not enough, because we need the skills to carry that conversation, to hold that space and guide the patient to do that self-discovery and coming out with their own plans. So these skills, next slide please, there are various models that you can use. We largely borrow from the OARS, for those of you who know motivational interviewing, but there are other models, and even generic good communication skills are useful. But the heart of it is we need to be present, truly present in that conversation. We need to be genuinely curious about what this person is in front of me, and what are the things that are important, and what the values, beliefs. We need to be truly curious. And we need to be really want to care. If I was the previous Tong Wei who really don't want to open a Pandora box, I really didn't want to care. So that will not work. And we have to be authentic and just be a person. That's why I casually coined the word I chat with people. Because it's really about a conversation between two people. But one carries some extra abilities from the professional and medical side. The other one is about that person, and they carry some expertise along. So a lot of times as healthcare practitioners, when we have a look at this, we say, hey, what are we really doing here? I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse, I'm an occupational therapist, I'm a psychologist, I'm a pharmacist. You can't possibly be telling me to have just a chat or a conversation here. But the truth is, if you remember the yield or the value that I described to you, the old way of consultation, we might be something gist, endocrinologist, cardiologist, gastroenterologist, or whatever gist you are. The actual impact that we may have is actually much, much discounted. But if we become truly person-centered and we practice this model in a system that supports that conversation to take place, we become a conversationalist first, it will actually enhance our whatever gist that you are. Okay? Next slide, please. Next slide. So, all this may sound a little bit fluffy to some of you, but is it really fluffy? Next slide, please. Actually, the end result is our patients get it. So if you look at, this is just a generic feedback form filled in by one of the patients who has undergone the PACE-D program in NUP. I'm going to dissect a bit the free text that they wrote down on the left lower quadrant of the image, okay? Now let's go through this a little bit in detail. I'm on the PACE-D program. It has been my partner for helping me reduce my sugar level. Now these might look very simple sentences, but do you realize the language? Helping my partner, helping me reduce my sugar. Now the voice written by the patient is really a first-person voice. And when we talk about person-centered care, it's not just putting the patient in the center of a PowerPoint slide and then surround them with whatever 10, 20 services. But this is true person-centeredness when the patients just subconsciously write a feedback. A lot of active voice came up. The talk with the doctor. Talk, chat, conversation. You see how the patients came up with that? With the doctor, with. And the results printout helps me to plan my diet, exercise, and targets. It's mine. As I have discussed and set my targets, not as advised by my doctor and told what to do, this program has helped to motivate me to be more conscious and responsible. In bracket, although can be a bit lazy at times. And this is really being authentic. The patient can even openly joke about it that, okay, and acknowledge that I can be a bit lazy and without the fear of being judged, right? So it's a work in progress in a sense, and every one of us is a work in progress. I'm happy that I was selected to be in it. Thank you. And then on the right, the doctor listens and gives suggestions that I am able to do within my capabilities, considering time. He speaks pleasantly and always caring. And this is the best testimony and evaluation or KPI that I think we can have. Put into a free text feedback. And it really shows that what we have done really speaks to what we set out to do. Next, please. So when I have medical students or sitting in my clinic, observing a care support planning conversation, and at the end of it, when I ask them, what do you think of the conversation? A lot of times, they don't know what just happened. All they told us is, Dr. Yu, it seems like you take a lot of social history. Because in our medical framework, that piece of think about the patient's life and aspirations and values and priorities fits into that narrow box at the very last of our history taking, which is called social history. However, when I dissect what I have actually very intentionally done, then they get it. I see it now. This is amazing. But our patients naturally get it because it is about our patients. Okay. So if you remember the movie Kung Fu Panda, right? Master Wu Gui said, there are no accidents. There are no accidents. And all this needs to be put in place for this to take place. Okay? I think I'm run over time, but I'm going to run through the next few slides quickly. Next, please. So I'm just going to show you some results, because some of you may be unsettled and say, okay, you talk about all this, but what about the outcomes? So we did qualitative studies on patients and practitioners, and if you look at the second box on the left, the patients say we discussed together, it's really a change. I can say the conversation now really changed, really changed. There's a two-way traffic already. That's how they describe it. On the right, the practitioners, you look at the lower box also, it says that the CSP makes me feel that I'm doing what a doctor should do. No, we've been trained to help people, we've been trained to listen with open-ended questions, get story, understand individual circumstances to deliver individualized training. But because of systemic issues, we've always been limited in the ability to deliver that. And therefore, over time, our practice has evolved into a more paternalistic kind. So CSP allows me to do what I've been trained to do, which is the original intent that all of us came into healthcare for. That the system may have paralyzed us. So if you recall the original intent of us starting medical school, for example. Next slide. So the first part is a score that we do, whether the patients experience shared decision making. And you can see that on the first orange bar, that's after the first CSP, immediately patients tell us that yes, they experienced shared decision making, and that went up with time. PAID score is a score that measures distress from diabetes. So interestingly, after the first CSP, you can see that the level of distress actually went up. Because a lot of issues are now brought onto the table and patients now own the plan, they get a little bit distressed. But once they get the issues out of the way slowly, over 2 years, 3 years, you can see the distress went down by 12 months and then stayed lower throughout until 3 years. The activation level went up. A1C, there's a slight improvement. LDL, we started off very well with 2.3 average, but even then, we see an increase, significant decrease in LDL, and BP stayed well controlled. Next, please. In the polyclinic, we did it not only a before and after. We have 2 intervention clinics and we have 2 control clinics, and we are at the very end of analyzing the results. I'm sorry that I still can't share it today, but taking together the preliminary results and the NUH pilot results, next slide, this is what we think how CSP works in a logic model. So having personalized CSP, immediately patients feel shared decision making, and as a result of that, they feel involved, they become less distressed, that means they live better. There's an increase in patient activation, meaning they have increase in skills, confidence, and knowledge for self-management, and that leads to behavioral change. And with that, A1C comes down maybe in a year or 2, but we will need a little bit longer probably to lead to reduction in macrovascular complications first, and then maybe even longer to see the results of hopefully lesser microvascular complications. The behavioral change bit needs to be supported and effected within their own living environment, which is a community, with the community support and resources. And that Sut Fan will come in later on to share with you. On the other side, doing this actually increased staff satisfaction, and it helped us find meaning in our work. And that would take care of the burnout issues as a very prominent one, attrition from our very precious public healthcare resource, and things like that, hopefully. Next slide, please. So we're all talking about Healthier SG, and there are 5 key features that we all know, right? And some of us might be focusing primarily on implementing the processes now to empanel 1 patient, 1 family doctor. And then after empanelment, people will be naturally focusing on making health plans. But remember, care planning is a verb, and it's a process that's important, not just the piece of care plan. And then there's a third thing called community partners. And actually, if you read the elaboration sentences below each of the headings, next please, it actually not only empowerment, it actually talks about relationship, and CSP can really help us. I hope you have a glimpse now. Sorry, to help us with building relationship between the healthcare professional and the patients. Health plans is going to be developed together, truly, through CSP. And then that conversation will be a gateway to channel or link our patients. Channel is a bad word. Link our patients and connect our patients to the activities that they really want to do. Next slide, please. But to enable this conversation to happen, if you recall the house, there is the roof and the floor and the foundation of the house that needs to be built in. So a lot of system changes needs to happen. Otherwise, this thing is very hard to take place. And I've already seen some questions following in about, do we really have time to do this? How do we do this in a busy clinic? And so on and so forth. So I'll pause here and I'll hand over to Clive to introduce Sweet Fun. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, everyone. So y'all may not know, but Tong Wei is also an artist, and I think that it clearly shows in his preparation and delivery. I don't know about you, I feel very inspired after the sharing. I also have a bit of cognitive dissonance because I close my eyes, then I'm like imagining, oh, this is a wise man speaking with white hair flowing and all that. Then I open my eyes and say, oh, this very suave young-looking young man. So now, later I know you all have a lot of questions for him, so we'll have time for that. I just want to just quickly talk about know what he meant by when patients have better ideas and the ideas work for them. I think this is where I heard so many times from seniors about humility and learning from patients. So to me, this is like really in action, learning from patients. And our next speaker, Sweet Fun, who will be, rounding us off before we go into the Q&A. And she's really a thought leader in this space, and she is an energetic change agent. So, we are, in a way, as health systems in transition. So it's great to have Sweet Fun here to round us off before the Q&A. For those who don't know her, she's the Deputy Chair of the Medical Board at Khoo Teck Puat Hospital and a Senior Consultant in Geriatrics Medicine. And she's also the Clinical Director for the Population Health and Community Transformation work at Khoo Teck Puat. So, Sweet Fun, welcome. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Clive. And thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to first say that I'm third because Lindsay and Tong Wei has done all the heavy lifting. And so now I'm really going to finish up with a bit of a lighter conversation here because fun is my name. Yeah. So really the work that we've been doing is about supporting people in their lives, and do they feel supported when they have to do self-management at home and in their communities? This is what we hope to show, a person-centered approach. So we are actually going to focus on the green line of life beyond the consultation room now, because Tong Wei and Lindsay have talked in great depth, inspiringly, about the orange bars and the preparation for the orange bars. But what happens on the green line? You've seen this picture before. Thanks to Year of Care Partnerships for the picture. When you hear the focused conversation that clinicians have in a consultation room about disease management, we really are asking them this question: what can you manage? And we're really talking about their condition. It's a very narrow focus because we have no time. We have so much to talk about, yeah? But when you talk about how a person is going to manage the impact of his disease on his daily living, you can actually have the possibility now of moving the needle towards what matters to you. And really all of us just want to live well, yeah? And in NHG, that's what we say. In our River of Life framework, we want to live well with our long-term conditions. We don't just want to live with our conditions, with HbA1c perfect, weight good, cholesterol good. We want to live well, which means, what do I eat? Can I still eat with my family members? Can I go to the hawker center with them, or must I have a special diet? How did food become diet? And must I have special exercises? How did physical activity become exercise or therapy? So to really shift that needle on how people manage disease in their life, we have to be broader. And PCSP, under Year of Care, gives us this possibility to broaden our conversations to life. And I've modified this picture. So at the micro level, the single practice, one-to-one, where the physician hits the road with the patient, yeah, care and support planning allows the individual to identify his own goals and the support he or she will need to achieve that goal, yeah. And they will say, I need to do smoking cessation, I need some coaching, but I can't come to the clinic. Can we have telehealth kits to support them? So different people will need different things, but you will find that's because of the diversity of the population that we deal with. If we have just one single program for all patients, one size fits all, we're going to find only a small number of people engaging with our flagship programs. So many, I suppose you call them programs, but activities could be another word for it, could fit different people differently. And if you have a wide menu, all of these will collectively come to a space where the regional health system, okay, at the macro level, ecosystem building level, okay, we on our behalf, on the behalf of the whole population, can plan a good menu of options for people when they are in the community. So today I'm really going to focus on what we have done better in our implementation of care. We haven't done the rest, so you can see our house not quite complete. I really congratulate NUHS for what they have done, and we really can learn from them how they have prepared, the patient and the professionals for that conversation. We are at the beginning of our journey, but what we can say we have done is really building the foundation of more than medicine with our participatory care ecosystem and community services ecosystem, which actually helps patients be people, helps them to be informed, to be involved, and to be in charge of their own lives and conditions. So I'm just going to focus on the one side pillar and the groundwork, and we are on a journey right now to finish the house. And so let's be introduced to Jeremy, 69 years old. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and he has depression. And he was given a list of medications until his doctor introduced him to the wellness kampong. Yeah. He is, do we know more about him? We just don't define him as the person with Parkinson's disease and mood disorder. He is an air conditioner repairman. He likes Sudoku. He's thinking all the time. He's calculating. And he found a new pleasure at the wellness kampong called Ramio. He had been actually looking for a place he could go in the day. And after visiting a lot of day centers, he says, I don't want to go there where they ask me to put a circle into a circle, a square into a square, a star into a star shape, and then that's one activity. Next activity, he didn't want to do that. He's thinking all the time. Yeah. So when he was introduced to the wellness kampong, he found people not forcing him to do things, but Joe him to come and do things, invited him to do some things. So he really got into Ramio, and he started to walk. It takes him half an hour to get from his apartment to the wellness center, and he found that he could walk. It helped him with his Parkinson's disease, but he found that it could help few other people. These people are not perfect people. They have cerebral palsy, they have falls, they have conditions, right? And he basically started to lead a walking kaki. Every morning you see him walking, and he's the one always at the last, watching out for his new friends now. And one day, one of these people said, I don't know what happened, the power in my house blew. So he went over to the person's house, reset the, I don't know what you call that circuit board, and told them, you really must not overload your circuits, and taught them how to rearrange their circuitry. And then after that, he kept getting requests, can you come and see my house? Can you check and see? I think I've overloaded. So he became a contributor to his community. He was not defined anymore by his disease. He was living a life. What about Hamid? He was 59 years old when we met him. He had just had a stroke. Risk factor, high blood pressure. He was introduced also to the wellness kampong. There he met Auntie Nancy. She was 80 when she met him. You will know Auntie Nancy when you go to the wellness kampong. She carries a sphygmomanometer in her hand. She's the BP squad lady, because the care coordinator, the center coordinator at the wellness kampong asked, Auntie Nancy, can you help me? You know, some of our friends here, our neighbors here have high blood pressure. Can you make sure that, you know, they learn how to measure their BP? So she met Hamid, and they have managed to help him control his blood pressure. The funny story about it is that Auntie Nancy's systolic blood pressure is usually about 150 to 160. And she gave herself an age discount. I owe what? I can have higher. It's a privilege. But then everyone's blood pressure that she measured was around 130, 140. Then she started thinking, I think I better bring mine down too. And so now they are actually mutually helping each other. A Malay man and a Chinese woman, he calls her his mother. Yeah? No nagging, just relationship. And Mr. Kong, he had chest pain. He was admitted to a public health institution. A lot of investigations, and he was sent home with a letter for him to return for procedure. He did not understand anything. He brought that piece of paper to the wellness kampong. Simi lai, ikong simi. What is this all about? What is it saying? All right. And the nurse, knowing that he was part of the repair kaki, told him, Mr. Kong, your pump still very good. The heart, no heart attack yet, so the pump still very good. Okay? Your plumbing, your pipes, chok liao. Okay? Electricity still good, your rhythm regular. Okay? Whatever it is, the doctor say go back for procedure is to flush your pipes. You must go, okay? Do not default. So he did, he went back, he had a few stents put in, and when he came back to repair kaki, he decided he would follow what the doctor recommended to give up smoking. And all his buddies at the repair kaki could see him fidgeting. He couldn't focus, he couldn't concentrate on repairing. So every few minutes, he would throw the tool down in frustration, or he would just say, I got to walk out and calm himself down. But with the support of his repair kaki friends, he succeeded in giving up smoking. He did something else too. He literally created an epidemic of smoking cessation among his buddies. Because when they saw him giving up smoking and the support that he had, they felt supported to do the same. I do not think that we would have had such success with smoking cessation at a clinic. Yeah. So, finish with the stories now. One of the lessons we learned is really to build a platform, an ecosystem, which can house diverse programs, not just large flagship programs. Yeah? And what we have built in the North is really two care ecosystems that work with each other. The first is called the participatory care ecosystem, where residents, they create this themselves. We have no we have no funding of this, all right? And the other one is what we traditionally know our partners. They provide services, yeah? The participatory care ecosystem really provides activities that people can join. It's free, it's not referred to. You don't get a referral to community. They don't know what to do with the referral, but you introduce people to them. Yeah, and we have written a book to describe what we have tried over the past 10 years, because it was really very difficult to find the right language to speak their stories without taking away their efficacy at building the neighborhoods that they would want for themselves. It is not what we did, but it is what they did. And what did we do? We stood back, we watched, we listened, we learned, and we supported where we could. But they did it by themselves. This book was just launched by Minister Ong on the 20th September. It is available for free, so it is too good to be kept to the North. And you can download the book at the link given. And the other key lessons, there are more, but we just take it to 3 first, right? Live the life, localize, really understand what it means to live a life well when you have long-term conditions. Yeah, localize to your neighborhood, not national programs. Those are good. They set the platform, but localize to where people can get to them. And start with what is strong, not what is wrong. When we focus on the condition and why their HbA1c is not good, their blood pressure is not perfect, we're always focusing on what is wrong. Yeah, but when we start with what they can do for themselves in the community, we look at their assets, their strengths in planning their own care plan, because that's what fits in their life. Then we start with what is strong, and we don't look for problems to fix. We look for talent to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Swee Fan. So we are moving to the panel discussion. So invite Swee Fan to take the seat together with our other panelists. I don't know about you, there's so much passion in the room. We received a record number of questions. I counted just before I came out, it's 55 questions. So we won't be able to get through all of them, but I want to say that the speakers have kindly agreed to just hang around at the front for those who have questions unanswered to just come by and speak to them individually. Thank you all again for your questions and participation. I just want to introduce 2 other panelists that we have here. So we have Associate Professor Lee Keng Hock from the SingHealth. He's the Deputy Chief CEO of SingHealth Community Hospitals and also at the SingHealth Office of Regional Health. And next, we also have Nick. Dr. Nick Louis Barnett is the co-chair and clinical lead of the Year of Care. So together with Lindsay, they have been here teaching a course on PCPS. So, yep. Okay, so I think I'll turn to Prof. Lee first. We just wanted Prof. Lee to get your views on maybe the sharing of the work that is happening at SingHealth on this population health conversation, and what are some of the system change that you are looking to put in place?
Thank you. I bring greetings from your colleagues from SingHealth. Really glad we have a chance to come together. And I think one of the key to the success of our healthcare system is that we have sessions like this. We get people from, experts from overseas. We get our own local guys who are working on it, and we come together and share ideas. So just to share the idea for SingHealth. So SingHealth, we also have an Office of Regional Health. So what SingHealth did was we went through all the institutions and looked for people who have been working in this field. And we assembled them into a committee under the SingHealth Office of Regional Health. So by virtue of my work in community hospitals and family medicine, and some transitional care programs that I was part of when I was part of GH, then I was invited. And it's a very interesting group because we are constantly thinking of ideas. And what we believe is that there's no one idea, and all ideas are equally good and respected, as I often hear from Swee Fan. So if there's a theory of everything for health and social care, that would be the best, but I don't think there is. So we go around looking for, it's like, you know, in physics, they have this unified field theory that explains everything. So you need a theory before you have programs. So what we have multiple theories. And my boss, Prof. Lee Chen, always tell us, don't be fixed on one idea. Pragmatism over ideology. Always use double loop learning. Whatever we intervene, always look for data and feedback, change the program if necessary, and even go double loop all the way back and change the theory itself. So we have multiple theories, and we are working on bringing it to become practical in our setting in SingHealth. Of course, now we see the light and say, yes, it's all about healthier SG and population health. How do we bring all our experience and past theories and modify it continuously to meet these needs? So one of the latest things that we sort of have a label for is called social prescribing. So in social prescribing, we hear this theory and we liked it, but again, we go through the same works. We say we need to adapt it. So we adapt it. Even the definition, I think now is quite unrecognizable, what we use to the original one. We say we need to have context, mechanism, and outcome inside the definition. So for context, we think it's about social determinants of health, how to optimize it. For mechanism, is about linking people to community assets. So we incorporated the ABCD theory into what we are trying to do. And for outcome, we say, what is the outcome? It's not absence of diseases, right? As we hear all the time. We say it should be well-being beyond what absence of disease or complications. And for well-being, we take a biopsychosocial approach. So it's an amalgamation of many theories. So we are on a journey like everyone else, a bit like a river of life, a bit like a health district, a bit about everything. So that's where we are. Thanks.
Thank you so much, King Hock. And I think that I do feel that the Healthier SG conversation, it feels like it has been a long time, but really, you think about it, from when the minister mentioned it in March to the white paper, it's just been 6 months, but it's created so much openness and willingness to learn, and the willingness to just talk about issues and our future plans. So the many theories that I think we all have, and it's just a great place to be starting right now. And I'd like to come over to Nick the House of Care has been shown in all 3 of our speakers' slides. Clearly, there is a lot to be said about it being a framework for care transformation. And one of the things that you notice is that it puts patients at the center. Right, so I think we do still have some work to be done in that. Could you give us some advice on how you all have used that to change mindsets?
It's always difficult to give advice, isn't it? So I'm just conscious too of all the questions that people have asked, so I don't want to take very long. The speakers have really focused on some of the systems that have developed around this area, but at the heart of it all, there's still a relationship between a citizen, a resident, a person, and us, who is prepared to give up some of their time to come and meet with us. And for me, what this has done in terms of reinvigorating my own experience of being a clinician is that it's allowed an entirely different sort of conversation, which feels much more productive, much more valuable, much more fun, actually. And so we have a sort of a phrase within our own thinking about dancing with patients rather than wrestling with patients. Both of them involve close physical contact. Both of them involve effort. One of them is about forcing somebody out of a circle, and the other one is about responding to the giving and taking that goes on, and at the end of the day is, I think, a much more fun experience all round. So we're looking really to help people to have a dance with the folk that come into their clinics and their surgeries rather than to have a wrestle with them.
Thank you so much, Nick. So we do have a lot of questions. I just want to put them into themes because there's 55 questions. And I think the first one is about time, right? Quite a number of you mentioned that time is a big concern, that the polyclinic consult time is only 10 minutes. If we do this PCPS, do we really have time to spend 20 minutes, half an hour with the patients? Is it okay if we put the question on the board? Thank you. So I think for this, well, maybe I'll turn to Tong Wei and King Hock, both in your practice. So if we do what we say we will do, right? Like we prepare the patients beforehand, and we sort of get a better yield from the consult. What's your take on the time? Would we need 20 minutes or we need half an hour?
I'll go first. Okay. So if you remember, my last slide is that platform and the stage for this conversation to happen. So I wouldn't pretend that time is not a constraint, but in order to have a rather comfortable duration for this to unfold and conclude, at least in a reasonable way, we find that we need about at least 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes to do this. And therefore, the systems need to be reshuffled to protect that time. And there are ways to do this, although it's not easy. We managed to do that in our polyclinic PACE-D program. And we are looking at expanding that to stepwise to all our polyclinics within NUHS. It's actually not about the absolute timing as well. It's about value of the time. So the second question that has the most votes, actually the second part of the questions, you can go to the second one, actually very nicely encapsulated that. So it's not about the time only. It's what you do with the time. That's where we build in systems to prepare patients. And in that sense, they come in and they're more prepared. And then also we send the results reflection letters with the explanation beforehand, and we call that decompression. So we decompress the things that you can do before so that you can have a greater space, even if you have just 10 minutes, to quickly go on to the more meaningful things that are important to the patients. Also, I mean, ironically, in some of our training, when we do role plays with the practitioners, once we train them to do PCSP, we do role play and we give them 30 minutes. In some of the role plays, after 10 minutes, actually the practitioner didn't know what to do already. So it's about skills and really know how to get the story out of the patient as well. So it doesn't mean that when we give you 30 minutes for 3 conditions, you will maximize on that. So we have to find a balance point, but I want to assure you that this can be done, but it might be a little bit different in your practice and different settings, and you have to co-create that to make that space for you to hold this kind of conversations? That's the short answer to that.
Yeah, thanks. That's a really good answer. Very hard to add on to that. So I shall invoke my authority in my previous life as the past president of the College of Family Physicians. And I see many family physicians here. My good friend Darren, who is currently the Censor-in-Chief, and I think still Program Director of FM Training. So we teach consultation like nobody else, I think. Pendleton Savantas, Todd and Davis, Roger Neighbors Inner Consult. Wow, we even make sure that they know it before they pass the exams. But of course, the challenge is in practice. You can teach them the skills, and the skills you can never be perfect. It's like the master will never be the master until one day when he realizes he's no longer the master. So it's Zen. But I think it's what it is about learning. It's continuous. So I hear about this PCPS, and I really loved it, and I think I must sign up for the course once that I have the opportunity again. It never ends. So giving people the skill is one thing, but you can frustrate them if you do not give them the resources to practice their skills. And I think that's where I hear the voice coming from many of these questions. A sense of frustration. So I think is to be frustrated is good rather than to be oblivious, but of course, how do you solve the problem? So skill does matter. You got to really be tip-top in your skills, continue to learn and practice and practice. In family medicine, we have this advantage that we see the patients again over time. So you need not do everything at one go, but you can do it over repeated takes. And I think many of my colleagues in polyclinics have started the teamlet concept, which I think is brilliant, because that really copes with the shortage of actual physical time. Now, the other thing, of course, is when you do it, the very important part is to realize, as we've heard many times, more haste, less speed. So you have, like we say, this checklist of things you need to go through, right? And you did go through and you thought you have completed, but you have never started because there's no engagement and there's no relationship. So all the checkboxes are done, but nothing is done. So why waste time filling checkbox and spend that precious 10 minutes? In fact, it might be good to spend maybe the whole 10 minutes on engagement and building the relationship, and you can do the task later on. So I think there are many strategies. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, King Hock. Thank you, Tong Wei.
Yeah, the regional health system is not to be left out of this conversation either. So you've heard about decompression of the consultation process. And actually, the truth is we don't need social prescription all the time. Because if residents know what is in their community, they don't need to get it out from a consultation. That engagement can be already done in the community when we have an open access to the community activities. And that is where it has to come into play together with the physicians so that the experience of the community is also carried into the consultation, and the experience that they get in the consultation room is now also carried into the community. So really access to community activities need not be through the doctor's office only. Yeah, and that will decompress time again in the consultation. Yeah.
Thanks, Irfan. So the next question, maybe I will ask Nick and Lindsay to give us some insights. Can we have the question flash on the screen, please? So I really thank you all for the openness. I like this kind of questions. Okay, it really generates discussion. So I think we mentioned that we need more time, right? And in the light of this population health conversation and preventive health, we know that upfront investment will save us a lot of admissions down the road. But how do we go about convincing our leadership to invest in this upfront effort?
I think we're already spending a lot of time doing ineffective things. We're seeing people often for short periods of time, and they're coming back again and again to clinics that are not necessarily addressing the needs that they have and allowing them to talk about things they want to. So I think there's a little bit about looking at the whole system of care that people get across a year, which was the idea of year of care, and looking at where the options are to save time on things that don't add value, and to try and put things like this in as well instead of that. in the UK, it's really been pushed very much by people, by citizens wanting a different deal, wanting to feel like the care they get involves them and is about them and is about the things that matter to them. So we've very much seen that pushed by citizens. So I think actually engaging people with long-term conditions in some of this agenda to design care with them is really important as well.
Well, I don't have very much to add. I think that's right. The term year of care, which is a very odd term, if I'm honest, was really because there was a recognition that we invest as a health system, whether we want to or not, we end up investing a certain amount of time, energy, effort and cost over a year in people with long-term condition. And what we're doing is we're rearranging that investment rather than necessarily investing more. We're rearranging it so that the time is consolidated and the activity is more fruitful. And that's really what this will deliver. Of course, we then have to realign the incentives that are in the system around that. So the incentives have to be more outcomes-based and less process or activity-based. And that there will be, if you're talking to your system leaders, that will be an important conversation to have.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nick and Lindsay. I think for the health service researchers out there, there's a lot of work to be done here. As we are going through system change, we'll need your help to really capture all this data to make the case to our senior management also. So the next question we have is about our workforce transformation, right? What are some of the skill sets that we need our clinicians, our therapists, our nurses to have to be able to have this conversation? And this question is very timely because Swee Fan and team has been leading a current series of workshops and trainings on this. So maybe I'll get Swee Fan to start us off on this. Thank you.
So we did this not in isolation. First of all, we have been embracing models that focus on person centricity. And this is just one more, but this is very specific to the clinic consultation. And that training really has opened my mind about what really can be done in the setting of a clinic, short time frame. It is not just a chit chat, it is a very intentional chat. So I learned that in the training. I had my skepticism. I had my worries about surely cannot lah, can meh, right? But when I saw it happening, not just with Tong Wei, also in Newcastle, it is very effective. The skills that we have are now very focused into moving a person through the stories and getting both sides, the professional story, the patient story, and exploring how the two stories can come together, then moving it into action planning. I've seen the consultation change. It is not action planning, is at the end if we have time. Very intentionally, it takes up half the consultation. They really spend time thinking about what the patient is going to do, whether it's really very important to him, because only if it is important to him will he invest in it himself when the physician is not in his life. And then we also deal with his confidence about doing that, and what then, after he has explored this, does he need from the physician, from the system to help him. And most times they walk out with a clear plan. Even if we did not write the plan onto a NG EMR, the patient has a plan in his head. There are lots of nuances in the training that you will only deeply appreciate if you went for the training. So we've had quite a bit of a strong response to the training. I think we will, together with NUHS, try and see if we can work together to get out more training opportunities to people, if that is what helps. Yeah.
Thanks, Irfan. And Tong Wei, I think you have been also scaling this in some ways, right? So
Yeah, I think the very key point is why is there a house? So when I first exposed to this model, when I came back, when our pieces are not put together in NUHS, I started doing it with my patients in my clinic without a very prepared patient. No, what I did was I simply changed the way I communicate, right? But it was really very exhausting because when the patient is not ready, not prepared, they are not at a ready stage to have that very powerful conversation. So sometimes it feels like very one-sided, although you have all the good intentions and all. And to respond to this conversation, actually many of us in here already have the skills and training already. And we all have empathy and all this. It's just how to show it. And in one of our training, right, there was at the end of day one, there was a staff nurse who stood up and said, really before this, I've been to many trainings, motivational interviewing and all that. After every training, right, I'm supercharged. I want to come back and apply all the skills. But the minute I start my day in my clinic or work environment, I get even more disappointed. So those who are more willing to do this type of work, if you put them into a system that disables them, they feel even more frustrated, more cynical, and more disappointed that they had the opposite outcome impression that say, this thing is all fairy tale, it doesn't work. But when at the end of day one, she said, this one gives me that glimpse that this is possible because it takes into account not only training you and change the professional, but it prepares the patient, it protects that 20 minutes for it to happen, and it builds in the system to build that whole platform or house, if you like, to enable this to happen. That is terribly important.
Can I just add one thing, which is that when we set out with the Year of Care, we recognised that there were skills that clinicians needed, but that the systems at the moment weren't organised in a way that was helpful. So one of the phrases we used to have early on was, how do we make it easier to do the right thing? People will be able to do the right thing, they'll want to do the right thing, but we have to make it easier to do the right thing.
So I think we've come to the end of the session. I do have so many more questions for them actually, but unfortunately we have to go for the tea break. But I would say that we will probably hang out here for a while at the front. I know that some of you have very individual questions about how pharmacists can get involved, questions about the NHS. So we'll be here up front for you all to come up to just engage with the speakers. I think with that, I'd just really like to thank all the speakers and panelists for your time and for this very excellent and invigorating session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Prof. Tan and fellow panelists. So may I get you to the front of the stage here, just take a step forward and take a group photo together. A big smile on your face. All right, thanks, Prof. Tan and panelists. So may I invite you to head back to your seat, please. So thanks everyone for the fruitful and insightful discussion. And thanks for the effort of trying to answer all the questions posted by the on-site audience. So we have now come to the end of session 5, track 1A. And before we pause the transmission, I would like to remind everyone that session 6 actually starts at 11 o'clock. For the online participants, see you later at 11. And now we invite the on-site audience to step up for a